Have you ever felt like the universe is trying to tell you something, but you can't quite figure out how to listen? You know that feeling when the same number keeps appearing everywhere you look, or when someone mentions exactly what you've been thinking about, or when opportunities seem to knock on your door right when you need them most. Here's what most people don't realize. These aren't just random coincidences. You're not imagining things, and you're definitely not going crazy. What's actually happening is far more profound than you might think. The truth is, you didn't click on this video by accident. Something inside you recognized a signal, a frequency that matched what your soul has been searching for. That's not mystical thinking. That's resonance in action. And understanding how resonance works is the key to unlocking a completely different relationship with reality itself. But before we dive deep into this transformative knowledge, I need you to do something important. Hit that like button right now and drop a comment letting me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world, and it helps this message reach more people who need to hear it. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos, because what we're about to explore will change how you navigate your entire life. Now let me ask you something that might hit close to home. Has this ever happened to you? You want something desperately, you visualize it, you think about it constantly, you do all the right things you've been taught about manifestation, yet somehow it still feels just out of reach. Or maybe something does arrive, but it doesn't stay. It slips through your fingers as quickly as it came. You might have blamed yourself, thinking you're not worthy enough, not spiritual enough, or simply not doing it right. But here's what nobody tells you. The problem isn't your worthiness, and it's not that manifestation doesn't work. The real issue is that most people are trying to communicate with the universe using the wrong frequency. Think of it like this. If you're trying to tune into your favorite radio station, but you're slightly off the dial, you'll get nothing but static and interference. You might catch fragments of the signal, brief moments of clarity, but never the full, clear transmission. That's exactly what's happening when your life feels stuck, when synchronicities seem random rather than meaningful, when your desires feel like they're floating somewhere in an unreachable dimension. You're not tuned in properly. And the fascinating part? Once you understand how to adjust your internal frequency, everything shifts. The signals become crystal clear. The synchronicities stop feeling like lucky accidents and start feeling like guidance, and your reality begins to reshape itself in ways that would have seemed impossible before. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover might completely transform your understanding of how you interact with the universe. We're going to explore why some people seem to effortlessly attract what they desire, while others struggle, despite working twice as hard. We're going to uncover the hidden mechanics of resonance that nobody talks about, and most importantly, you're going to learn exactly how to recognize when the universe is speaking directly to you without falling into the trap of obsessive sign-seeking that actually blocks your manifestation. Because here's the paradox most people miss. The universe doesn't shout at you from the heavens with dramatic announcements. It doesn't send you bold, unmistakable messages written across the sky. Instead, it whispers with surgical precision, waiting for the exact moment when you're finally ready to hear. And that moment usually doesn't arrive during your most confident, put-together days. No. The call tends to come when you're exhausted from running in circles, when the same old story you've been telling yourself starts to crack at the edges, when your heart quietly admits that there has to be something more authentic than this endless loop you've been living. Think about the last time something in your life fundamentally shifted. I'm willing to bet it didn't happen when you were desperately searching for answers. It happened when you became receptive, when you stopped forcing solutions and simply allowed yourself to be open. That's the hidden truth about transformation that most people completely miss. The universe operates on precision, not volume. It finds the cracks in your armor, the moments when your defenses are down, the spaces between your thoughts where something new can actually enter. And here's what's fascinating. Those cracks aren't weaknesses. They're doorways. But here's where most people go wrong on this journey. They start looking for signs everywhere, turning every little coincidence into a cosmic message, obsessively analyzing whether the universe is trying to tell them something. They chase breadcrumbs like it's a treasure hunt, and in doing so, they completely miss the real communication that's happening. Because listening to the universe isn't about collecting evidence or building a case for your beliefs. It's about developing a completely different kind of awareness, one that can distinguish between mental entertainment and genuine alignment. Let me explain what I mean by that. There are two types of occurrences in your life. The first type are coincidences that merely entertain your mind. They're interesting. They might make you pause for a moment. They give you something to talk about at dinner, but ultimately they leave you exactly where you were before. They don't shift anything inside you. They're just noise dressed up as meaning. Then there are synchronicities that actually change your breathing, that land differently in your body, that create a subtle but undeniable shift in your internal landscape. These are the ones that align you, that move you closer to your truth, that reorganize something fundamental in how you're perceiving reality. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. This channel is dedicated to going beyond surface-level manifestation advice and getting into what actually works. Subscribe so you don't miss the deeper conversations we're having here. The difference between these two isn't always obvious at first glance. Both might seem equally mysterious or meaningful on the surface. But your body knows the difference. Your nervous system recognizes authentic resonance versus mental fascination. When a real synchronicity occurs, there's a quality of recognition that happens deeper than thought. It's not that you understand it intellectually. It's that something ancient inside you says, yes, this is it. There's no argument needed, no convincing required. It just lands with a certainty that exists beyond logic. This is why so many people struggle with manifestation, despite doing all the techniques correctly. They're operating from their minds, trying to decode the universe like it's a puzzle to be solved, when what's actually required is a quality of presence that allows them to feel the energetic signature of their reality. Your mind can analyze patterns all day long, but it's your body, your breath, your gut feeling that tells you whether you're in alignment or just spinning in mental loops. And the impact of understanding this distinction cannot be overstated, because once you learn to trust that deeper knowing, your entire decision-making process transforms. You stop second-guessing yourself constantly. You stop looking outside for validation of what you already sense internally. You begin to move through life with a different kind of confidence, one that doesn't come from having all the answers, but from trusting your ability to recognize truth when it appears. Now, I want to go even deeper into this, because what I'm about to share with you reveals exactly how to develop this capacity to listen without becoming dependent on external signs. And it's something that completely changed my own relationship with manifestation. Write in the comments, I'm learning to listen differently, if this is making sense to you so far. Here's something that might surprise you. You already have access to the most sophisticated guidance system in existence, and you've had it your entire life. It's not an app you need to download, not a technique you need to master, not a spiritual practice that requires years of discipline. It's your body. And I'm not talking about some abstract metaphorical concept here. I mean, your actual physical body is constantly giving you precise feedback about what's aligned and what isn't, about which direction to move and which to avoid, about what serves your evolution and what keeps you stuck in old patterns. The problem is that most of us have been trained to ignore this intelligence. We've been taught to override our body's signals with mental reasoning, to push through discomfort because we think we should, to force ourselves down paths that make logical sense but feel wrong in our gut. And this disconnect is one of the primary reasons why manifestation feels so difficult for so many people. They're trying to create from their heads while their bodies are screaming a completely different message. Pay attention to this the next time you're making a decision or considering an opportunity. Notice what happens in your body. Where there's genuine alignment, where something is truly meant for you, you'll feel a sense of expansion. It might be subtle, it might not be dramatic, but there's an opening, a softening, a quality of yes that exists beyond words. Your breath might deepen slightly, your shoulders might relax. There's a feeling of spaciousness, even if the opportunity itself feels challenging or scary. That expansion is your body telling you there's coherence here, there's truth here, there's something worth exploring. Contrast that with what happens when something isn't right for you, even if it looks perfect on paper. Your body contracts, your chest might tighten, your stomach might clench, your jaw might set, your breath might become shallow. These aren't random physical responses, they're precise information. They're warnings, invitations to pause and review, signals that something about this situation doesn't match your authentic path. And here's the revelation that changed everything for me. Real creation doesn't come from insisting your way through contraction. It comes from following coherence, from trusting those moments of expansion even when they don't make logical sense yet. But the universe doesn't just speak through your body, it also communicates through the structure of your experiences. And it tends to use three distinct forms that most people completely overlook because they're too busy looking for dramatic signs. The first is repetition. When the same symbol, the same conversation topic, the same name, the same type of person keep showing up in your life over and over, that's not coincidence. That's a signal asking for your attention. It's not trying to obsess you or make you paranoid. It's trying to focus you on something important that you might be missing. The second form is interruption, and this one frustrates people the most because it feels like obstacles and delays. Something breaks down right before a trip you planned. A job opportunity falls through at the last minute. A relationship ends just when you thought it was getting serious. Your mind interprets these as failures or bad luck, but often they're protective interruptions. The universe is literally stopping you from going down a path that would have cost you more than you realize, saving you from investing energy in something that wasn't meant for you. The hidden truth behind these interruptions is that they're course corrections, not punishments. And then there's the third form, which is perhaps the most powerful and the most ignored: stillness. Those moments when everything goes quiet, when the noise drops away, when you're suddenly left in a space of silence that feels almost uncomfortable because you're so used to distraction. That stillness isn't emptiness. It's the universe showing you what's essential, stripping away everything that doesn't matter so you can see clearly what does. Most people run from stillness, fill it immediately with music or scrolling or busy work, and in doing so, they miss the most direct communication available to them. Understanding these three forms completely transforms your journey because you stop waiting for some grand cosmic announcement and start recognizing the sophisticated behind-the-scenes orchestration that's already happening in your life. You begin to see that the universe has been speaking to you all along. You just weren't trained to recognize the language. And once you do recognize it, once you start trusting your body's wisdom and reading the patterns of repetition, interruption, and stillness, your decision-making becomes radically more effective because you're working with reality instead of against it. Drop a comment saying, "I'm paying attention now," if you're starting to see these patterns in your own life. Now, let's talk about something that trips up almost everyone on this journey, something so subtle that most people don't even realize they're making this mistake. They confuse intuition with impulse, and that confusion costs them dearly. Because here's what happens. You feel a sudden rush of energy telling you to do something, to message that person, to quit that job, to make that investment, to change everything immediately. And you think that surge of urgency is your intuition speaking. So you act on it, you make the move, and then days or weeks later, you're looking at the wreckage wondering what went wrong. The truth is, that wasn't intuition. That was impulse. And the difference between these two is everything. Impulse operates on speed. It's frantic, it's demanding, it pushes you to act right now before you lose the opportunity, before the feeling fades, before you talk yourself out of it. Impulse shouts at you, creates a sense of emergency, makes you feel like if you don't move, immediately something terrible will happen or something wonderful will slip away. And here's the kicker, impulse always leaves you exhausted. Even when it works out, even when the decision turns out okay, you're drained because you operated from a place of internal chaos. Intuition works completely differently. Intuition isn't fast, it's clear. It doesn't push, it guides. It doesn't create urgency, it creates direction. Where impulse screams, intuition whispers. Where impulse demands immediate action, intuition offers sustained knowing. And the most telling difference of all is how you feel after following each one. When you act from genuine intuition, even if the action itself is challenging, even if it requires courage or effort, you feel clear afterward. There's a rightness to it that exists independent of the outcome. You know in your bones you made the aligned choice. So when you feel that surge of urgency telling you to do something right now, that's your signal to stop. Breathe, step back, let the urgency pass through without acting on it, because urgency is almost never a reliable guide. It's usually fear dressed up as motivation, anxiety masquerading as inspiration. But when you feel clarity, even if it's quiet, even if it's not particularly exciting, that's when you move. And you move with simplicity, without drama, without needing to convince yourself or anyone else. You just take the next obvious step because it's clear. But even intuition can be distorted. If your internal channel is full of interference, and this is where most people's manifestation practice breaks down completely, they're trying to receive guidance while their system is overwhelmed with static. Think of it like trying to tune into a radio station while 3 other stations are bleeding through at the same time. You might catch fragments of the message, but you'll never get the full, clear transmission. Go ahead and hit that like button if this resonated with you. It's a simple gesture that tells me this message landed, and it helps more people find these conversations. There are 3 primary types of interference that muddy your connection to universal intelligence. The first is emotional interference. When you have unprocessed emotions sitting in your system, unresolved grief or anger or fear that you've been avoiding, those emotions actively distort every signal you receive. They act like a filter, coloring everything that comes through with their particular frequency. So you might receive genuine guidance, but by the time it reaches your conscious awareness, it's been twisted by whatever emotion is unintegrated in your system. Then there's mental interference, which shows up as repetitive thought patterns that loop endlessly in your mind. The same worries, the same stories, the same justifications running on automatic. These thoughts literally replace authentic guidance with mental noise. Your mind becomes so loud with its habitual narratives that there's no space for anything new to enter. You think you're thinking clearly, but you're actually just rehearsing old scripts. And finally, there's energetic interference, which happens when your energy is scattered across a dozen different concerns, relationships, projects, and distractions. You're spread so thin that even when guidance comes through, it's diluted. It doesn't have enough concentrated attention to become actionable. It just adds to the general overwhelm you're already Experiencing. Here's the hidden truth that transforms everything. Before you ask the universe for signs, before you seek guidance, before you try to manifest anything, you need to clean your channel. And you absolutely cannot seek meaningful messages when you're full of anxiety, because anxiety has one job and one job only. It translates everything as threat. It turns neutral information into danger, opportunity into risk, stillness into abandonment. When you're operating from anxiety, you're not receiving reality as it is. You're receiving reality filtered through fear. This is why so many people feel like the universe is giving them mixed messages or playing games with them. The universe isn't confused. Your reception is compromised. And the impact of understanding this cannot be overstated, because it means you have far more control over the quality of your guidance than you realized. You're not at the mercy of whether the universe decides to speak clearly. You're responsible for creating the internal conditions that allow clear reception. Type, "I'm cleaning my channel" in the comments if you're recognizing where your own interference has been blocking clear guidance. So how do you actually clean that channel? How do you shift from operating in interference mode to operating in clarity? The answer is so simple that most people overlook it completely, dismissing it as too basic to be powerful. But I'm telling you right now, this is the most accessible and immediate transformation tool you have available to you every single moment of every day. It's your breath. And before you roll your eyes, thinking you've heard this 1,000 times, let me explain what's actually happening behind the scenes when you consciously shift your breathing pattern. Your breath is quite literally the steering wheel of your frequency. It's not a metaphor, it's physiology. When you breathe shallow, stuck up in your chest with quick, tight inhales, you're signaling to your entire nervous system that you're in some form of danger. Your body interprets shallow breathing as stress, and when your body is in stress mode, your reality becomes superficial. You stop creating and start reacting. You stop observing and start defending. Your perception narrows. Your thinking becomes rigid. You interpret neutral situations as threatening, and you make decisions from a contracted state that almost always leads you further away from what you actually want. But when you consciously slow down your breath, when you let air descend all the way down to your abdomen, instead of keeping it trapped in your upper chest, when you exhale even slower than you inhale, as if you're deliberately emptying out all the accumulated noise and tension, something remarkable happens. Your nervous system receives a completely different signal. It interprets deep, slow breathing as safety. And when your body feels safe, your reality expands. Suddenly you have access to the part of your brain that can observe instead of react, that can choose instead of default to old patterns, that can actually create something new instead of just managing what already exists. This isn't some spiritual bypass or positive thinking trick. This is you taking control of the single most influential factor in how you experience reality moment to moment. Your breath determines your state determines your perception determines your decisions, and your decisions determine your life. It's that direct. So when you find yourself caught in anxiety, spinning in mental loops, feeling overwhelmed by the noise in your head, the fastest way back to clarity isn't more thinking, it's breathing. Slow, deliberate, conscious breathing that tells your system, we're safe enough here to see clearly. And from that place of physiological calm, from that state where your body isn't screaming danger signals at you, that's when you can ask the essential question. Not 10 questions, not a list of concerns you need the universe to address. One question, because here's what most people don't understand about the relationship between questions and answers. Multiple questions come from distrust. When you fire off question after question, what you're really saying is, I don't trust that I'll get a real answer, so I better cover all my bases. That energy of distrust pollutes the entire inquiry process. You're not actually open to receiving guidance. You're hedging your bets. You're testing the universe like it's some unreliable friend who might let you down. But a single, focused question comes from inner authority. It comes from a place that trusts its own capacity to receive truth. So instead of scattering your energy across 15 different concerns, you concentrate everything into one essential inquiry. Something like, what do I need to recognize today to align my manifestation? Or, what am I avoiding feeling that's blocking my creation right now? These aren't random examples. These are the types of questions that cut through surface-level noise and get to the core of what's actually happening in your inner world. And here's the part that requires real discipline. Once you ask the question, you don't invent the answer. You don't immediately jump to conclusions based on what you think you should be doing or what you've read in some book or what worked for someone else. You create space and you allow the answer to arrive. Sometimes it comes as a sensation in your body. Sometimes it shows up as a memory that suddenly makes sense in a new way. Sometimes it's just a quiet knowing that appears without fanfare. The answer doesn't need to be dramatic to be accurate. In fact, the most profound revelations often arrive with remarkable simplicity. This is the journey from mental noise to genuine reception, and it happens through the deliberate combination of regulated breathing and focused inquiry. You're not trying to force the universe to speak louder. You're making yourself quiet enough to hear the whisper that's been there all along. Right, I'm asking better questions if you're ready to shift from scattered seeking to focused inquiry. Now, I need to share with you one of the most important principles that completely revolutionizes how you approach manifestation. And it's something that goes against almost everything you've been taught about creating change in your life. Most people believe that if they want something different, they need to go out there and make it happen through action, through effort, through sheer force of will. They think the physical world is primary and their internal state is secondary. But the hidden truth is exactly the opposite. And once you grasp this, your entire strategy for transformation shifts in the most liberating way possible. Here's the principle. Frequency precedes form. Always, without exception. The visible reality you're experiencing right now, everything you can see and touch and measure, is not happening in real time. It's a delayed effect. It's the materialization of patterns that already existed within you before they showed up in your external circumstances. Think of it like watching a movie in a theater. What you're seeing on the screen already existed on the film reel. The projector is just making it visible. Your consciousness is the projector, your internal frequency is the film, and your life circumstances are what shows up on the screen. This means that before something takes form in your life, before that relationship appears, before that opportunity knocks, before that financial shift happens, it already existed as a pattern within you. Not as a wish or a hope, but as an actual energetic configuration. And life, which is far more intelligent than we give it credit for, organizes matter and opportunities and encounters around the signal you're constantly emitting. Not the signal you emit when you're doing your manifestation practice for 10 minutes in the morning. The signal you emit all day long, especially when you're not paying attention, especially when you think nobody's watching, especially in those mundane moments between your inspired actions. So the question becomes, what signal are you actually broadcasting? And here's where it gets interesting, because your frequency isn't some abstract, mystical concept that you can't really pin down. It's incredibly concrete. It's the specific mix of thoughts you repeat habitually, the emotions that have become so familiar you don't even notice them anymore, the chronic tension you hold in your body that's become your normal, and the silent expectations you carry about how things tend to go for you. All of this combines into a signature frequency that's as unique and identifiable as your fingerprint. But there's another layer that's even more powerful, and it's the one that most people are completely unconscious of. It's your identity. not the identity you claim in conversation or write in your journal or post on social media. I'm talking about the silent decree that runs in the background of your psyche, the phrase you don't necessarily say out loud but that operates like an invisible mandate, shaping everything you attract and allow. For some people, that decree is, "I am the one who struggles." They don't wake up and announce this to the world, but it's there, underneath every decision, influencing every outcome. And life, being the perfect mirror that it is, keeps confirming that identity by presenting situations where struggle is required. For others, the decree is, "I am the one who waits." They're always in preparation mode, always getting ready, always almost there but not quite. And the universe, responding to that frequency, keeps delivering scenarios where waiting is necessary, where timing is off, where things almost happen but don't quite materialize. Then there are those whose silent decree is, "I am the one who receives." Not because they're more deserving, or more spiritual or more advanced, but simply because that's the identity they've settled into, consciously or unconsciously. And life responds accordingly by opening pathways for reception. The impact of recognizing your actual operating frequency versus the frequency you wish you had cannot be overstated. This is where real transformation becomes possible, because you can't change what you can't see. As long as you're convinced you're broadcasting confidence and abundance while you're actually broadcasting doubt and scarcity, you'll keep getting confused about why your results don't match your intentions. The external world isn't broken. Your reading of your internal world is incomplete. This isn't about judgment or self-criticism. It's about brutal honesty in service of liberation. When you can look clearly at the thoughts that loop through your mind, when nobody's asking you to be positive, when you can feel the emotions that have become your baseline normal, even though they're not serving you, when you can notice the identity decree that's been running your life from behind the scenes, that's when you finally have access to the control panel. That's when manifestation stops being a mystery and starts being a learnable skill. Leave a comment saying, "I'm examining my frequency," if you're willing to look honestly at what you've actually been broadcasting versus what you thought you were creating. So how do you actually know what frequency you're operating on? Because here's the thing, your intentions mean almost nothing in this equation. I know that sounds harsh, but it's one of those hard truths that, once you accept it, actually sets you free. You can intend abundance all day long. You can visualize success until your eyes hurt. You can affirm your worth 1,000 times before breakfast, but none of that tells you what frequency you're actually broadcasting. You know what does tell you? Your results. Your actual, tangible, repeating results. Look at your life like you're examining a game board. What patterns keep showing up? What arrives in your life with ease, almost effortlessly, without you having to force or manipulate or convince? What consistently delays, getting close but never quite materializing? What breaks down repeatedly, requiring constant maintenance and repair? What costs you far more energy, time, or resources than it reasonably should? These aren't random occurrences. These aren't punishments from an angry universe. This is information. This is your dominant vibration made visible, giving you precise feedback about what frequency you've been holding steady. Most people resist this level of honesty because they don't want to take responsibility for their current reality. It feels easier to blame circumstances, other people, bad timing, or bad luck. But that resistance keeps them trapped in the exact pattern they're trying to escape. The moment you're willing to look at your repeating results as a mirror, reflection of your actual frequency rather than as evidence of how unfair life is, everything changes, because now you have data. Now you have something concrete to work with, instead of just vague wishes for things to be different. And here's where the real work begins, because elevating your frequency isn't what most people think it is. It's not about putting on a happy face when you feel terrible. It's not about denying your sadness or pretending your grief doesn't exist or bypassing your anger with spiritual platitudes. That's not elevated frequency, that's suppression. And suppression always backfires because what you push down doesn't disappear, it just goes underground, where it runs your life from the shadows with even more power than before. Elevating frequency means something much more sophisticated than forced positivity. It means organizing your interior world so that there's one clear direction instead of 5 conflicting agendas, all pulling you in different directions. At the same time, it means achieving what I call coherence, which is the state where what you think, what you feel, and what you actually do are all pointing the same way. No more saying you want one thing while feeling another and doing a third. No more internal civil war, where part of you is trying to build something while another part is secretly sabotaging it. Think about what happens in your typical day. You set an intention in the morning. Maybe you decide today is the day you're going to prioritize your goals, take care of your body, speak your truth, whatever it is, and maybe for the first hour you're aligned with that. But then something triggers you, someone says something that bothers you, an old fear surfaces, and suddenly you're making decisions from a completely different place. You abandon the morning's intention, you override your needs to please someone else, you fall back into the familiar pattern even though you know it doesn't serve you. That abandonment of self, while trying to build something externally, creates a frequency of internal chaos, and chaos doesn't manifest clarity. Coherence is staying with yourself even when it's uncomfortable. It's honoring the intention you set, even when the emotion shifts. It's doing the thing you said you'd do, even when you don't feel like it anymore. It's being the same person in private that you are in public. It's making sure your actions match your declared values instead of contradicting them. And this isn't about perfection. You will mess up. You will have moments of incoherence. You will make decisions that don't align. That's part of being human. But the overall trajectory, the dominant pattern, that's what matters. When you achieve even 70% coherence, when most of the time your thoughts and feelings and actions are pointing in the same direction, your frequency stabilizes. And a stable frequency is a powerful frequency because it stops sending mixed signals. The universe isn't confused about what you want anymore. Your own system isn't fighting itself anymore. Everything becomes clearer, including what needs to shift for your next level of transformation to occur. Drop "I'm building coherence" in the comments if you're recognizing where your internal contradictions have been keeping you stuck. Now let me show you the most practical application of everything we've discussed so far, because this is where the concept becomes tangible, where theory transforms into something you can actually feel and use in real time. Your body isn't just a passenger on this journey of manifestation. It's the laboratory where energy either stabilizes or scatters. And most people completely miss this because they're so focused on what's happening in their heads that they forget they're walking around in a sophisticated biofeedback system that's constantly telling them exactly what frequency they're holding. Here's a simple practice that will demonstrate this immediately. Place your attention on your chest right now. Not aggressively, not with strain, just a gentle awareness right at the center of your chest. Now inhale slowly, and as you do, imagine the air entering directly through that center point, like your heart has its own breathing mechanism. Let the inhale be smooth and deliberate, filling not just your lungs, but that entire space around your heart. Then exhale even slower than you inhaled, and as you release that breath, visualize yourself letting go of an invisible rope that's been keeping you tense, that's been holding you in a contracted state. That rope might be worry, might be control, might be the need to figure everything out right this second. When you do this for even 30 seconds, something measurable happens. Your nervous system down-regulates, your heart rate variability changes, the tension in your shoulders drops slightly. And here's the revelation. Your frequency has already shifted. not through affirmations, not through visualization, not through trying to think yourself into a better state, through breath and body awareness. This is the hidden truth about manifestation that the purely mental approaches miss entirely. Energy becomes stable in the body, not in the mind. The mind can generate ideas all day long, but it's the body that anchors frequency. But stability isn't created through one breathing practice. It's created through the accumulation of aligned decisions over time, which brings us to something that most people get completely backwards. They think identity changes through big declarations, through making promises to themselves about who they're going to become, through New Year's resolutions and dramatic commitments. And then they wonder why nothing actually shifts. The transformation they were counting on never materializes because they were working with the wrong mechanism. Identity doesn't change with promises. Identity changes with habits. And habits are simply vibration made into action, repeated until it becomes your new normal. This is where the real work happens, in the mundane choices you make when nobody's watching, in the small decisions that seem inconsequential but are actually reprogramming your entire operating system. So if you want to shift your frequency from chaos to calm, from doubt to certainty, from scarcity to abundance, you don't start with grand gestures. You start by getting ruthlessly honest about what frequency you're currently emitting. Give yourself permission to name it clearly. Not the frequency you wish you had, not the one you're trying to project, but the actual one that's running in the background. Maybe it's, I'm emitting rush, constantly moving faster than necessary because some part of you believes that if you slow down, everything will fall apart. Maybe it's, I'm emitting doubt, second-guessing every decision, always wondering if you should have chosen differently. Maybe it's, I'm emitting scarcity, feeling like there's never quite enough time or money or support. Whatever it is, name it, because you can't shift what you won't acknowledge. Then comes the pivot, which is choosing your new frequency. Not as a fantasy, not as a performance, but as a genuine decision about who you're becoming. I choose calm means something specific. It means the next time urgency shows up, you're going to pause instead of react. I choose authority means you're going to trust your own knowing instead of constantly seeking external validation. I choose abundance means you're going to make decisions from fullness rather than fear of loss. These aren't just nice words. They're directional coordinates for your entire nervous system. But here's where most people stop, and why their frequency never actually changes. They choose the new frequency mentally, but never confirm it physically. They don't give their body the evidence it needs to believe this shift is real. So the declaration remains theoretical, floating, somewhere in the realm of good intentions, while their actual behavior continues running the old program. The breakthrough happens when you attach one minimal daily gesture to your chosen frequency. Something so small you can't talk yourself out of it, but significant enough that your system registers the change. If you chose calm, maybe your gesture is taking 3 deep breaths before checking your phone in the morning instead of immediately diving into the chaos. If you chose authority, maybe it's speaking your preference in one situation where you'd normally defer to keep the peace. If you chose abundance, maybe it's appreciating something you already have for 10 seconds instead of scrolling through what you don't. The specifics matter less than the consistency because it's the repetition that rewrites the code. Type, I'm choosing my frequency. If you're ready to move from hoping things change to actually changing the daily gestures that create your reality. There's a common misconception about manifestation that sabotages more people than almost anything else, and it's the belief that you need to feel intensely positive emotions to create what you want. People think they need to maintain this constant state of excitement, this perpetual high-vibration enthusiasm, this unshakable optimism that never wavers. And when they can't sustain that level of emotional intensity, when the excitement fades or doubt creeps in, they panic. They think they've lost their manifesting power, that they've somehow broken the connection, that they need to pump themselves back up to that emotional peak, or everything will fall apart. But here's the hidden truth that changes everything. Intense emotion is inherently unstable. It rises, yes, and it can feel incredible while it lasts, but it inevitably falls. That's the nature of intensity. It's a wave, not a foundation. And you cannot build solid, lasting manifestation on a wave. What you actually need is something that sounds far less dramatic, but is infinitely more powerful. You need mature emotion. Specifically, you need what I call tranquil confidence. Tranquil confidence isn't adrenaline. It's not the rush you get from a motivational video or an inspiring conversation or a sudden breakthrough moment. Those things have their place, but they're not sustainable. Tranquil confidence is quieter, steadier. It's the internal sensation of this is settling into place, even though you can't see the full picture. Yet, even though the external evidence hasn't caught up, even though logic might suggest you should be worried, there's this underlying knowing that things are organizing themselves in the right direction, and that knowing doesn't need to shout or prove itself or seek constant validation. Think of it like a tree. The part of the tree you see, the trunk and branches and leaves, that's impressive. That's what gets photographed and admired. But none of that would exist without the root system. Underground, completely invisible, doing the essential work of stabilizing and nourishing the entire structure. Tranquil confidence is like that root system. It doesn't show itself, it doesn't perform, but it sustains everything. And when your manifestation practice is built on this foundation rather than on emotional highs, your results become far more consistent because you're not riding the roller coaster of fleeting feelings anymore. This shift from seeking intense emotion to cultivating tranquil confidence represents a fundamental maturation in how you approach creation. You stop trying to force yourself to feel a certain way and start allowing yourself to simply be grounded in your direction. You stop needing external circumstances to cooperate before you feel secure, because your security comes from internal coherence rather than external validation. And that changes your entire energetic signature in ways that make you magnetic to opportunities, synchronicities, and resources that wouldn't have been accessible when you were operating from emotional instability. But tranquil confidence doesn't emerge from nowhere. It's built on the foundation of clear intention, which brings us to something crucial that most people completely misunderstand. They treat intention like a wish, like a preference, like something they kind of want but aren't really committed to. That's not intention. That's just mental noise masquerading as purpose. Real intention is an energetic decision. It's the precise moment where your consciousness stops being passive and becomes responsible for what it's emitting into the field of possibility. When your intention is genuinely clear, when it's not mixed with doubt or hedged with escape routes or diluted with competing agendas, something remarkable happens. Your mind calms down because it finally has a clear directive instead of trying to solve 15 problems simultaneously. Your emotion naturally orders itself because there's no longer internal conflict about what you actually want versus what you think you should want, and your actions become obvious, not complicated, not requiring elaborate strategies, just clear next steps that emerge from alignment rather than from force. But when your intention is confused, when you say you want one thing but your behavior suggests something else, when you're simultaneously trying to manifest abundance and protect yourself from disappointment, your entire system fragments. Your mind spins trying to reconcile contradictory goals. Your emotions oscillate wildly between hope and fear. Your actions disperse in multiple directions, none of them sustained long enough to create real momentum. You end up exhausted and confused, wondering why you can't seem to get traction on anything, when the real issue is that you never made a true energetic decision in the first place. This is why the journey of manifestation isn't about learning more techniques or finding the perfect formula. It's about developing the capacity to make clean, clear, energetic decisions and then sustain them through the inevitable challenges and uncertainties that arise. It's about moving from scattered, hoping to focused intention, from emotional reactivity to tranquil confidence, from mental chaos to embodied clarity. Write, "My intention is clear," in the comments if you're ready to stop hedging and make a real energetic commitment to what you're creating. So let's get even more specific about intention, because not all intentions are created equal. In fact, there are three fundamentally different types of intention operating in most people's manifestation practice, and only one of them actually creates stable, lasting results. The other two create temporary gains at best and chronic frustration at worst. And the tricky part is that all three can look identical on the surface. You can't tell them apart by what someone says they want. You can only distinguish them by examining what's happening underneath the desire, in the hidden layers of motivation that most people never investigate. The first type is what I call control intention. This is when you want something not because it genuinely calls to you, but because you're trying to avoid feeling something uncomfortable. Maybe you want a relationship to escape loneliness. Maybe you want financial success to avoid the shame of not measuring up. Maybe you want recognition to cover over deep insecurity about your worth. The desire itself might be legitimate, but the fuel driving it is fear. You're trying to control your emotional experience by manipulating external circumstances, and while that might work temporarily, it's fundamentally unstable because you're building your security on something outside yourself that can always be taken away. The second type is validation intention. This is when you want something primarily to be seen, approved of, or admired by others. Maybe you want the business success so people will finally take you seriously. Maybe you want the perfect body so you'll be desired. Maybe you want the impressive title so your family will stop questioning your choices. Again, there might be nothing wrong with any of these goals in themselves. But when the core motivation is external validation, you end up trapped in an exhausting cycle of trying to prove yourself. And here's the kicker. Even when you get what you wanted, even when people do approve and admire you, it doesn't fill the internal void, because that void was never about external achievement in the first place. Then there's the third type, which is truth intention. This is when you choose a path simply because it expands you internally. It makes you more of who you authentically are. It calls to something deep in your being that recognizes its own evolution. Truth intention doesn't come with guarantees. Your ego can't point to assured outcomes or promised rewards. You're moving toward it because it feels true, because it aligns with your growth, because something in you knows this is your path, even if you can't fully articulate why. And this is the only type of intention that manifests with real stability, because it's rooted in your actual essence rather than in fear or external approval. The impact of understanding this distinction cannot be overstated. Most people are unconsciously operating from the first two types of intention and wondering why their manifestations feel hollow when they arrive, or why they self-sabotage right when success is within reach. It's because on some level they recognize that achieving the goal won't actually resolve the underlying fear or need for validation. Their system knows the truth, even when their conscious mind is still convinced that getting the thing will fix everything. So how do you clean your intention? How do you shift from control or validation intention to truth intention? You ask yourself three questions that cut through all the surface level desires and get to the core of what's actually happening. First question, what do I really want to manifest beyond the form? Not the thing itself, but the quality, the feeling, the state of being you believe that thing will give you. Maybe you think you want $1 million, but what you actually want is freedom. Maybe you think you want a relationship, but what you actually want is to feel chosen and valued. When you identify the essence beneath the form, you open up possibilities you couldn't see before because you were fixated on one specific vehicle. Second question, what am I trying to avoid feeling if this doesn't arrive? This one requires serious honesty because it reveals your hidden motivation. Maybe you'd have to feel like a failure. Maybe you'd have to confront loneliness. Maybe you'd have to face the fear that you're not special. Whatever it is, naming it takes away its unconscious power over you. You can't be controlled by what you're willing to look at directly. Third question, what part of me must mature to sustain what I say I want? This is where manifestation transforms from asking into becoming. Because the truth is, if you're not ready to hold what you're asking for, even if it arrives perfectly, you'll find a way to lose it or sabotage it or make it painful. So the real work isn't just attracting the thing, it's becoming the person who can naturally sustain that level of abundance, love, success, or whatever you're creating. These questions aren't meant to be answered once and forgotten. They're tools for ongoing refinement, for continuously cleaning your intention so it stays aligned with truth, rather than drifting back into control or validation. And when your intention is genuinely clean, when it's coming from truth and you've done the maturation work, manifestation stops feeling like a struggle and starts feeling like a natural unfolding. Drop, "I'm cleaning my intention" in the comments if these questions are revealing layers you hadn't seen before. Now let's talk about something that sounds simple, but is actually the most underestimated power you possess in the entire manifestation process. It's not your willpower, it's not your affirmations, it's not even your emotions. It's your attention, and I don't mean attention in the casual sense of what you happen to notice throughout your day. I'm talking about attention as a silent magnetic force that quite literally determines what becomes real in your experience and what remains invisible, what grows in your life and what withers, what you become capable of and what stays forever out of reach. Here's the mechanics of it. Where you place your attention, you place your energy. That's not metaphorical. That's measurable. Your nervous system directs resources toward whatever captures your focus. And where you place your energy, you place your life. Not eventually, not theoretically, but actually. Your attention is constantly selecting from the infinite field of possibility what you're going to perceive as real, amplifying through repetition whatever you focus on regularly, and sustaining through normalization whatever you give consistent mental real estate to. This is why two people can live through the exact same day, encounter the same circumstances, have access to the same opportunities, and yet manifest completely different results. The difference isn't luck. The difference is focus. Think about someone who's focused primarily on what's wrong, what's missing, what's unfair. They wake up and their attention immediately goes to problems. Throughout the day, they notice every inconvenience, every slight, every piece of evidence that confirms their worldview that things are hard and people can't be trusted. By the end of the day, they've collected dozens of data points, reinforcing their reality of struggle. Meanwhile, someone else in virtually identical circumstances has their attention trained on possibility, on what's working, on small wins and moments of connection. They encounter the same traffic, the same challenging coworker, the same delayed project, but their attention filters these experiences differently. They're literally living in a different universe, despite occupying the same physical space. And that different universe generates different opportunities, different relationships, different outcomes. The hidden truth that nobody tells you is that you're doing this filtering constantly, mostly unconsciously. You're deciding what matters and what doesn't through where you consistently place your attention. And if your attention has been captured by worry, by comparison, by worst-case scenarios, by grievances from the past, by anxiety about the future, then that's the reality you're actively constructing moment by moment, not because you're broken or cursed, but simply because attention is creative. It doesn't passively observe reality. It actively participates in shaping what reality you experience. But here's where it gets really practical. Not everything deserves the same level of your focus. In fact, most things don't deserve your focus at all. There are conversations that drain your energy systematically. There's content you consume that subtly intoxicates your mindset with limiting beliefs. There are stories you tell yourself repeatedly that shrink your sense of what's possible. And if you're allowing all of this into your awareness without any filter, without any conscious curation, you're essentially leaving the doors and windows of your consciousness wide open and wondering why your internal space feels chaotic and your manifestations feel blocked. If you're consuming ideas of scarcity every day through the media you watch, the people you talk to, the social media you scroll through, your energetic field quite literally gets dirty. It gets contaminated with frequencies that aren't yours, with narratives that don't serve you, with vibrations that pull you away from your chosen frequency. And then you wonder why your visualization practice isn't working, why your affirmations feel hollow, why you keep cycling through the same patterns. It's because you're trying to plant seeds in soil that's been poisoned by the very information you're voluntarily consuming. Your responsibility, and this is non-negotiable if you want to manifest with consistency, is to close the window to noise. Not all of it. You're still a human living in the world, but the chronic, repetitive, unnecessary noise that serves no purpose except to keep you distracted, fearful, and disempowered. This isn't about becoming isolated or living in a bubble. It's about becoming selective, about training what I call conscious attention, where you actively decide what gets your focus instead of passively allowing your attention to be hijacked by whatever is loudest or most dramatic or most addictive in the moment. The transformation that happens when you take back control of your attention is immediate and profound. Suddenly you have energy you didn't know you had because you're not bleeding it out through 1,000 tiny attention leaks. Your decisions become clearer because you're not processing contradictory messages all day long. Your manifestations start landing because you're finally giving them the sustained focus they need to materialize instead of diluting your intention with constant mental channel switching. Right, I'm reclaiming my attention if you're recognizing how much of your focus has been scattered and you're ready to direct it with intention. Let me share with you a framework that completely changed how I think about my daily mental activity, and it might transform yours too. Think of your attention as a voting system. Every single time you give your focus to something, you're casting a vote for that thing to have more reality in your experience. Not symbolically, but actually. When you spend 20 minutes scrolling through content that makes you feel behind, inadequate, or worried about the state of the world, you just cast 20 minutes worth of votes for anxiety and insufficiency. When you spend 10 minutes genuinely appreciating what's already working in your life, you cast votes for abundance and gratitude. Your attention is literally tallying up what gets to be real for you. If you give daily attention to your lack, to what you don't have yet, to how far you still need to go, to everything that's missing or broken or insufficient, you're voting for lack. You're training your perceptual system to become an expert at spotting gaps and problems. And your mind, which is an incredibly efficient learning machine, becomes extraordinarily good at what it practices. So if it practices finding evidence of lack all day long, it will get better and better at that specific skill. You'll become a world-class identifier of everything that's wrong, and your manifestations will reflect that expertise. But if you give daily attention to your progress, even when it's small, even when it feels insignificant compared to where you ultimately want to be, you're voting for growth. You're training your mind to recognize movement, to appreciate momentum, to notice what's shifting even in subtle ways. And over time, that practice rewires your entire perceptual apparatus. You start seeing opportunities you would have missed before. You start recognizing resources that were invisible to your old way of looking. You start making connections that seemed impossible when your attention was consumed by lack. This is why mindset work isn't just feel-good philosophy. It's practical engineering of your consciousness. You're literally programming what becomes visible and viable in your experience through the sustained direction of your attention. And the cumulative impact of these daily votes is what creates the trajectory of your life over months and years. Small attentional choices that seem meaningless in the moment compound into massive differences in outcome, because attention doesn't just observe your world, it constructs it. But attention alone isn't enough. You can focus on something all day long and still not manifest it if there's no emotional charge behind that focus. This is the piece that so many purely mental manifestation techniques miss entirely. They treat creation like an intellectual exercise, like if you just think about something clearly enough and frequently enough it will appear. But that's not how the universe actually works. Life doesn't respond to concepts. Life responds to charge, and charge is emotional. Emotion is the fuel that powers manifestation. If intention gives you direction and attention gives you focus, emotion is what actually makes things move. It's the energetic force that bridges the gap between invisible possibility and tangible reality. And when I say emotion, I'm not talking about the fleeting feelings you have in response to good news or bad news. I'm talking about the sustained emotional climate you carry inside your body, the emotional tone that's become so familiar to you that you barely notice it anymore, the feeling state that your nervous system has normalized as just how life feels. Think about it this way: your body is constantly generating an emotional frequency, a baseline feeling tone that operates underneath all your thoughts and activities. For some people, that baseline is anxiety. They might have moments of calm or happiness, but underneath those moments there's a low-grade current of worry that never fully goes away. For others, the baseline is resentment or frustration, a chronic sense that things should be different than they are. For others still, it might be a quiet contentment or a steady confidence that exists independent of circumstances. That baseline emotional frequency, the one your system recognizes as normal, is broadcasting a signal into the field of possibility every single moment. And that signal is what determines what can actually show up in your life and what will remain blocked. If your baseline is fear, even when you're consciously trying to manifest abundance or opportunity, your deeper emotional broadcast is saying, danger, contract, protect. And the universe, which responds to your actual frequency rather than your stated preferences, delivers experiences that match that contraction. This is the hidden truth behind why some people seem to effortlessly attract what they want while others struggle, despite doing all the right techniques. It's not about worthiness or cosmic favoritism. It's about the emotional fuel they're running on underneath all their conscious efforts. And here's the empowering part. Just like you can train your attention, you can shift your baseline emotional frequency. Not by faking feelings you don't have, but by genuinely shifting the internal climate you're sustaining through how you relate to yourself, your body, and your daily experience. Type, I feel the shift, if you're recognizing that your emotional baseline has been the missing piece in your manifestation practice. Now, let's address something that most people get completely wrong about working with emotions in the manifestation process. There's this idea floating around that you should always be positive, always maintain high vibration, always bypass any uncomfortable feelings in favor of staying in a good mood. But that approach is not just ineffective, it's actually harmful, Because it creates what I call emotional debt. And emotional debt, just like financial debt, compounds over time and eventually demands to be paid with interest. Here's what actually happens when you don't process an emotion. Let's say something triggers frustration in you, but instead of actually feeling it and moving through it, you suppress it because you think good manifestors don't get frustrated. Or you distract yourself immediately, scrolling your phone or jumping into busy work. That frustration doesn't just evaporate because you ignored it. It stays in your body as physical tension. Maybe your shoulders tighten. Maybe your jaw clenches. Maybe your stomach starts holding a knot you don't even consciously notice anymore. Over time, that stored tension becomes a mental habit. You start viewing certain situations through the lens of that unprocessed frustration, and eventually it manifests as external repetition. The same type of conflict keeps showing up in different relationships. The same kind of obstacle keeps appearing in different projects, not because the universe is testing you, but because you're carrying an unintegrated emotional pattern that's actively creating those repetitions. The way out isn't to pretend the emotion doesn't exist. The way out is to process it without making it dramatic, and that starts with naming it precisely. Not, "I feel bad" or "I'm upset," but exactly what the emotion is. Frustration, disappointment, fear, grief, anger, shame. When you name it accurately, you immediately take some of its power away because you've moved it from a vague, overwhelming feeling to a specific, identifiable experience. Then you locate it in your body. Where is this living right now? Your chest, your throat, your belly. You bring your attention there, not to make it go away, but to actually be present with it. And then you breathe toward that place, like you're sending oxygen to a cramped muscle, creating space around the emotion, instead of trying to compress it further. Finally, and this is the part that transforms everything, you ask it a question: what are you trying to protect? Because every difficult emotion is actually a protection mechanism. Anger is often protecting a boundary that was crossed. Fear is protecting you from potential loss or harm. Shame is protecting you from rejection. When you understand what the emotion is trying to protect, you can address the actual need underneath instead of just fighting with the symptom. This is emotional maturity, and emotional maturity is what allows your manifestations to stick instead of arriving and then immediately falling apart. But there's another emotional pattern that sabotages manifestation even more insidiously than unprocessed feelings, and that's the pattern of operating from need rather than desire. On the surface, these might look the same. Both involve wanting something. But the energetic signature is completely different, and that difference determines whether what you're trying to create can actually stabilize in your life or not. Healthy desire says something like, "I would genuinely love to experience this, and I'm willing to create the path to it." There's openness in that statement. There's agency. There's a recognition that you're participating in creation rather than just waiting for delivery. But need says something very different. Need says, "If I don't have this, I collapse. If this doesn't work out, I'm not okay. If I can't get this, I'm fundamentally insufficient." And when your field is emitting that frequency of collapse, of desperation, of "my entire well-being depends on this one thing working out," the universe responds with scenarios that confirm instability. Not as punishment, but as reflection. Think about how you feel around someone who needs something from you desperately. There's an energy of grasping, of pressure, of expectation that makes you want to pull away even if you care about the person. The same dynamic happens with manifestation. When you need something desperately, you're actually creating energetic resistance to receiving it because need broadcasts lack and instability rather than readiness and capacity. So your work, the real inner work that makes manifestation possible, is converting need into choice. It's the shift from "I need this to be okay" to I genuinely want this, and I'm actively creating toward it. But my fundamental okayness doesn't depend on it arriving in any particular timeline or form. That might sound like you're giving up or lowering your standards, but it's actually the opposite. You're claiming your power back from external circumstances and relocating it where it belongs, inside your own being. And paradoxically, that's when things start showing up with far less resistance, because you're no longer strangling the possibility with desperation. Drop "I choose, I don't need" if you're recognizing where desperation has been blocking what you're trying to create. There's a layer beneath everything we've talked about so far that most people never even think to examine, and it's the layer that ultimately determines whether all your intention setting and attention training and emotional work actually produces results or just keeps you spinning in circles. I'm talking about your beliefs. And before you dismiss this as something you've already heard about 1,000 times, I need you to understand that a belief is not what you think it is. It's not just an opinion you hold or a perspective you've adopted. A belief is far more powerful and far more insidious than that. A belief isn't an idea you have, it's an idea that has you. It's a silent agreement, a pact made between your mind, your emotions, and your sense of identity that operates completely outside your conscious awareness most of the time. And here's the critical part that changes everything. A belief functions as an instruction to the universe. It's telling reality what's possible for you, what's safe for you, and what's permitted for you to experience. Not through your words, not through your stated desires, but through the deep structural assumptions that govern how you interpret and respond to everything that happens. When you have a belief that says good things don't last, you might consciously want stability and you might work hard to create it, but underneath all that effort, there's an instruction running that says this isn't sustainable. And the universe, which responds to your internal permission structure rather than your surface wishes, will find ways to confirm that belief. Not because it's cruel, but because it's accurate. You're not actually giving permission for good things to last, because at a foundational level, you don't believe they can. That belief is setting boundaries around what's allowed to materialize and stick in your experience. The real revelation here is understanding that the universe responds to your internal permission, not to what you say you want, not to what you think you deserve intellectually, but to what you actually permit at the deepest level of your being. And if your beliefs are quietly vetoing possibilities before they even have a chance to form, then no amount of manifestation technique is going to override that veto. You're essentially asking for something with one hand while pushing it away with the other, and then wondering why it never arrives, or why it shows up and immediately falls apart. So how do you change a belief that's been running your life from the shadows, maybe for decades? Here's what doesn't work: arguing with it intellectually. You can understand rationally that you deserve abundance. You can read books about worthiness. You can affirm your value 1,000 times. But if your body doesn't believe it, if your nervous system hasn't integrated it, you'll keep reacting from the old belief. You'll sabotage opportunities. You'll feel uncomfortable receiving. You'll find ways to confirm the limitation even while you're consciously trying to transcend it. A belief isn't dismantled through debate or understanding. It's dismantled through demonstration of another truth. It's changed through evidence that directly contradicts what the old belief predicted. And that evidence doesn't come from thinking differently, it comes from acting differently and then experiencing different results. This is why changing a belief is fundamentally a training process, not an intellectual one. You're training your entire system, body and mind together to recognize and integrate a new truth through repeated exposure to evidence that the new truth is actually viable. Let me make this concrete. If you believe, "I always mess things up when it matters most," you don't change that by telling yourself you're capable. You change it by deliberately choosing situations where you can practice following through when the stakes feel high, and then actually doing it. The first time might be shaky and uncomfortable, but you did it. That's one piece of evidence against the old belief. You do it again in a slightly different context. More evidence. You keep creating small wins that directly contradict what the belief predicted would happen, and over time, your nervous system starts to register a new pattern. The old belief loses its grip, not because you convinced yourself it was wrong, but because you proved through your own experience that it's no longer accurate. This is what it means to become someone who acts as if the new belief is already real. Not through pretending or faking confidence, but through generating genuine evidence through your choices and actions that a different truth is possible. You're literally retraining your identity at the behavioral level, and that retraining changes what your system believes is safe, possible, and permitted. And when those deep permission settings shift, your manifestations shift automatically, because you're finally not blocking yourself at the foundational level anymore. Right, I'm creating new evidence. If you're ready to stop arguing with your old beliefs and start proving them wrong through consistent action. Now we need to talk about something that trips up even the most dedicated manifestors. Something that seems counterintuitive, but is absolutely essential if you want your desires to actually materialize instead of staying perpetually just out of reach. And that's the art of releasing. Most people hear manifestation and they think it's all about attracting, about pulling things toward you, about making things happen through force of will and focused intention. But that's only half the equation, and honestly, it's the less important half. Because manifestation isn't just about attracting, it's fundamentally about allowing. And allowing requires a skill that most people actively avoid because it feels too vulnerable, too risky, too much like giving up. That skill is releasing. But here's what releasing actually is. As opposed to what most people fear it means. Releasing isn't surrendering to life in some passive, defeated way where you just accept whatever happens and stop trying. That's not what I'm talking about at all. Releasing is surrendering to the tension you're creating by gripping so tightly. It's recognizing that when you hold onto a desired outcome with fear's hand, when you're white-knuckling your way through the manifestation process because you're terrified it won't work out, you're not actually helping your cause. You're contaminating the very thing you want with the frequency of fear, and fear-based manifestation is inherently unstable even when it succeeds. Think about what happens when you desperately need something to work out. Maybe it's a job interview, or a relationship, or a financial opportunity. You want it so badly that you can't think about anything else. You're obsessively checking for updates, analyzing every small signal, trying to control every variable. That energy, that grip, that desperation, it doesn't make success more likely. It makes you rigid, anxious, and energetically repellent. People can feel it, opportunities can sense it, and ironically, the very intensity of your need creates resistance to receiving what you're asking for. The hidden truth is that somewhere along the way, you confused control with security. You started believing that if you could just control enough variables, manage enough details, anticipate enough problems, you'd finally be safe, you'd finally get what you want. But excessive control doesn't actually create security, it creates rigidity. And rigidity is the enemy of manifestation, because life doesn't move through rigid, predetermined scripts. Life moves through organic, living pathways that require flexibility, adaptation, and a willingness to let things unfold in ways you didn't plan. When you're rigidly attached to exactly how something must happen, to the precise form it must take, to the specific timeline it must follow, you cut yourself off from all the other ways the universe could deliver what you're actually asking for. Maybe you're fixating on one particular job when there's a better opportunity forming that you can't see yet because you're not open to it. Maybe you're convinced a specific person is the answer when there's someone more aligned waiting in a direction you haven't looked. Maybe you're demanding immediate results when what you're building actually needs more time to become sustainable. Releasing is the practice of opening the fan of how. It's letting go of your insistence that things must happen in one specific way and instead allowing your energy to concentrate on what's actually essential. Your intention, your frequency, your aligned action. You stay clear on what you want to create and who you're becoming in the process, but you release your stranglehold on controlling the mechanism of delivery. And this isn't resignation. This is strategic surrender. It's understanding that your job is to hold the vision and take the next aligned step, while the universe's job is to orchestrate the infinite moving parts you can't possibly manage anyway. The transformation that happens when you genuinely release is almost miraculous. Suddenly opportunities appear that weren't visible before, pathways open that seemed completely blocked. Things start flowing with a natural timing that actually works better than what you were trying to force, and you feel lighter, more peaceful, more present, because you're no longer carrying the exhausting burden of trying to micromanage reality. You're participating in creation instead of trying to dominate it, and that shift in posture changes everything about what can reach you and what you can sustain. But releasing doesn't mean you stop caring or stop taking action. It means you care deeply while holding loosely. You take consistent action while staying flexible about outcomes. You commit to the process while releasing attachment to one narrow vision of success. This is the balance point where manifestation becomes sustainable instead of draining, where you're working with life's intelligence instead of against it. Type, "I'm learning to release," if you're recognizing where your need for control has been blocking the flow of what you're trying to create. There's one relationship that determines whether you'll actually see your manifestations come to fruition or whether you'll give up right before the breakthrough, and it's your relationship with time. Most people treat time as the enemy in their manifestation journey. Every day that passes without visible results feels like evidence that it's not working, that they're doing something wrong, that maybe this whole thing is just wishful thinking. But that perspective is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how creation actually works in the real world, not just in theory. When you truly understand time in the context of manifestation, you realize it's not delay, it's maturation. Think about what happens when you plant a seed. You don't put it in the ground today and expect to harvest fruit tomorrow. There's a natural sequence of phases that must occur. The seed has to break open, roots have to form, a shoot has to push through the soil, leaves have to develop, the plant has to strengthen, flowers have to bloom, and only then does fruit appear. And trying to rush any of these phases doesn't speed things up, it kills the plant. Your manifestations work the same way. They're organic processes, not mechanical transactions. But your mind hates this. Your mind wants to jump directly from intention to harvest because the uncertainty of the in-between process makes it deeply uncomfortable. Your mind wants manifestation to work like pushing a button where you input your desire and immediately receive your result. It wants guarantees, timelines, clear milestones it can track and measure. And when reality doesn't cooperate with that demand for instant gratification and complete certainty, your mind interprets the gap as failure. But life doesn't behave like a button you press. Life behaves according to natural law, which includes timing that serves the sustainability of what's being created rather than the impatience of the person doing the creating. Here's the shift that changes everything. When you stop seeing time as an obstacle and start seeing it as an essential ingredient in the manifestation process, you relax, not into passivity, but into trust. You understand that the period between planting and harvest isn't wasted time, it's development time. Things are happening beneath the surface that you can't see yet, but that are absolutely necessary for what you're building to have a stable foundation. And that understanding allows you to stay in the game long enough to actually win, instead of quitting right before the tipping point. But there's a critical distinction you need to make here, because there's a way of waiting that's productive and a way of waiting that's just fear masquerading as patience. Resignation is what happens when you surrender to fear. It's when you stop taking action because you've decided it probably won't work out anyway, so why bother? It's passive, it's victim-minded, and it's the death of manifestation because you've essentially withdrawn your participation from the creation process. You're waiting, sure, but you're waiting while doing nothing, while believing nothing will change, while reinforcing the very patterns you claim you want to transcend. Strategic patience is something entirely different. Strategic patience is surrendering to the wisdom of the process without abandoning your role in it. It's understanding that some things take time to develop properly while still showing up consistently to do your part. It means sustaining a minimal routine that confirms your new identity even when you don't see immediate results from it. It means doing what actually corresponds to your vision without obsessively monitoring for outcomes every 5 minutes. It means having completely normal days where nothing dramatic happens and you're not receiving cosmic signs, while still maintaining your direction, still trusting your path, still taking the small aligned actions that compound over time. This is where most people fail, in this gap between starting and succeeding. They begin with enthusiasm. They take action for a while, but when the results don't show up on their preferred timeline, they interpret that as rejection or impossibility. They don't understand that they're in the maturation phase, that roots are forming, that foundations are being built, that their system is being prepared to actually hold what they're asking for. And so they give up, they switch to a different goal, they decide manifestation doesn't work, and they never get to see what would have happened if they'd just maintained their practice for another month, another season, another cycle. The impact of developing strategic patience cannot be overstated. It's the difference between people who occasionally get lucky and people who consistently create results. It's the difference between those who abandon ship at the first sign of difficulty and those who understand that challenges are part of the development process, not evidence of being off track. When you cultivate strategic patience, you become unshakable in your commitment while remaining flexible in your approach, and that combination is extraordinarily powerful. Leave "I trust the timing" in the comments if you're shifting from impatience and doubt into strategic patience and sustained action. Now let's talk about action, because this is where so many people get confused and end up exhausting themselves while making very little actual progress. They think manifestation is about doing more, hustling harder, taking massive action constantly. And then they wonder why they're burned out and still not seeing the results they want. The problem isn't that they're not doing enough. The problem is they're taking action from the wrong place. And that makes all the difference between genuine progress and just spinning your wheels. Aligned action means acting from the identity you're actively building, not from the fear you're desperately trying to overcome. When you take action from fear, even if that action looks productive on the surface, you're reinforcing the very frequency you're trying to transcend. You're confirming to your nervous system that there's something to be afraid of, that you're not safe unless you control every variable, that disaster is always one mistake away. That energy of fear-driven action is exhausting, and it doesn't actually move you toward your vision. It moves you in circles, creating busyness without breakthrough. But when you take action from the identity you're cultivating, even if that action is smaller or quieter than what fear would demand, you're building something sustainable. You're confirming your intention with every choice. You're demonstrating to your system that you're serious about this transformation. And here's the revelation that most people miss. The difference between progress and burnout has nothing to do with how much you're doing. It has everything to do with where you're doing it from. You can take one aligned action per day and make more meaningful progress than someone taking 20 fear-based actions, because aligned action compounds. It builds on itself. It creates momentum in the right direction instead of just creating motion. Think about what happens when you check your email obsessively, when you redo work that's already good enough, when you say yes to things you don't actually want because you're afraid of missing out, when you stay up late pushing through exhaustion because you're convinced rest equals failure. That's all fear-based action. It might look dedicated. It might even produce some short-term results, but it's not sustainable and it's not aligned. Aligned action, on the other hand, feels different in your body. There's a quality of rightness to it, even when it's challenging. You're moving from clarity rather than from panic. You're choosing rather than compulsing. But even perfect action won't save you if the identity underneath hasn't shifted. And this is where we get to the ultimate truth about manifestation that most people completely overlook. Manifesting something isn't the end of the journey. Getting the thing you wanted doesn't mean you've succeeded at manifestation, because here's what actually happens for most people. They finally attract what they've been working toward, whether that's a relationship or money or an opportunity, and then almost immediately they sabotage it. They find ways to push it away, to complicate it, to prove it wasn't meant for them after all. And they think they just have bad luck, or that they're cursed, or that good things never last. But the real issue is that their identity never shifted to match what they were trying to create. Manifesting isn't just about getting something and checking it off your list. Manifesting is fundamentally about becoming someone who's capable of living with what arrives without sabotaging it, without fearing it, without converting it into a burden or a problem. It's about developing the internal capacity to hold the very thing you're asking for. Because if you're not ready to hold it, if your identity hasn't matured to the level where you can naturally sustain that level of abundance or love or success, your system will find a way to return you to what's familiar, even if what's familiar is limitation. This is why what you call a miracle isn't actually an isolated event. It's not luck or cosmic favoritism or being in the right place at the right time. Though those things can play a role, what looks like a miracle from the outside is actually a consolidated identity on the inside. It's someone who's done the work of becoming the kind of person for whom that level of receiving is normal, natural, sustainable. They're not shocked when good things happen because their identity already includes the capacity to receive and maintain goodness. Their nervous system isn't triggered into sabotage mode when success arrives because they've trained themselves to be comfortable at that altitude. And this is the work that actually matters, the behind-the-scenes transformation that makes everything else possible. You're not just trying to attract different circumstances, you're becoming a different person, someone with a different baseline, different beliefs, different emotional patterns, different habitual responses. That's the real manifestation, and everything external is just the natural reflection of that internal shift. Type, "I'm becoming who I need to be," if you understand that the real work is identity transformation, not just circumstance manipulation. There's an aspect of manifestation that operates so quietly in the background that most people never even notice it's there, and yet it might be the most influential force shaping their daily reality. I'm talking about the words you use, not in your manifestation practice or your affirmations, but in your regular everyday speech. The casual phrases you say without thinking, the habitual responses that roll off your tongue automatically, the little comments you make to yourself and others throughout the day. These aren't just words, they're decrees, and your reality is listening. Your external world doesn't just respond to what you think or visualize or intend during your focused practice time. It responds far more powerfully to what you decree with constancy, and your most frequent decrees aren't the carefully crafted affirmations you say in the mirror each morning. They're the unconscious phrases you repeat dozens of times throughout your day without even registering that you're doing it. Phrases like, "I can't handle this," or "this always happens to me," or "it's so hard," or "I never have enough time." These seem like innocent observations, harmless ways of expressing frustration or venting stress. But energetically, they're orders, they're instructions you're giving to your subconscious and to the field of possibility about what's true, what's normal, and what's permitted in your experience. Every time you casually say, "I can't," you're not just describing a current limitation. You're reinforcing it, making it more solid, more real, more permanent. Every time you say, "It always happens to me," you're not just noticing a pattern. You're actually commanding that pattern to continue, to repeat, to prove itself true again. Your words carry creative power, whether you're aware of it or not, whether you intend them to or not. And the words you use most frequently, especially the ones you don't even think about, are programming your reality far more effectively than any deliberate manifestation technique you might be practicing. The transformation that's possible when you become conscious of your everyday language is staggering, but it doesn't happen through forcing yourself to be artificially positive or through denying what's actually happening. It happens through what I call bridge words, which are phrases that honor where you are while simultaneously opening the door to where you're going. Bridge words acknowledge reality without cementing it as permanent. They create space for growth without requiring you to pretend you've already arrived. So instead of saying, "I can't do this," which closes the door completely, you say, "I haven't mastered this yet." Do you feel the difference? The first phrase makes incapacity permanent. The second makes it temporary and implies that mastery is possible with time and practice. Instead of, "This always happens to me," which declares an unchangeable destiny, you say, "This is a pattern I'm correcting." You're not denying that the pattern exists, but you're also not giving it authority to continue indefinitely. You're acknowledging it while simultaneously claiming your power to change it. Instead of, "What bad luck," when something doesn't go as planned, you ask, "What information is this giving me?" This single shift changes you from a passive victim of circumstances to an active learner who's constantly extracting value from every experience. You're not pretending. Setbacks don't hurt or don't matter. You're refusing to interpret them as evidence of your powerlessness and instead choosing to see them as data that can inform better decisions. This isn't about denying your genuine feelings or bypassing difficult emotions. You can feel frustrated and still choose words that don't trap you in that frustration permanently. You can acknowledge challenges while refusing to speak about them in ways that make them seem insurmountable. The bridge words aren't lies or delusions. They're more accurate descriptions of reality than the absolute statements we tend to make when we're upset. Because the truth is, most things aren't always or never. Most limitations aren't permanent. Most patterns can be changed. And your language should reflect that truth. The hidden impact of this practice shows up gradually but powerfully. Your mind starts to believe what you're consistently telling it through your words. Your nervous system begins to relax because you're not constantly reinforcing danger and impossibility. Other people respond to you differently because the energy you're projecting through your language has shifted, and opportunities start appearing that match your new verbal frequency rather than your old one. It's not magic, it's just that you've stopped inadvertently blocking yourself with your own declarations of limitation. The real work here is catching yourself in the moment when those old automatic phrases start to come out and consciously choosing a bridge word instead. It feels awkward at first, almost like speaking a foreign language, But with practice, the new phrases become just as automatic as the old ones were, except now your automatic language is working for your evolution rather than against it. Right, I'm choosing my words consciously. If you're recognizing how much your casual language has been programming your reality without your awareness. There's a reason why some people can follow all the manifestation techniques perfectly and still feel like nothing's moving, while others seem to effortlessly create space for miracles to land. And it has nothing to do with how many affirmations they say or how vivid their visualizations are. It has to do with something far more fundamental that happens before any of those techniques can work. Before reality shifts externally, something has to shift internally. And that internal shift isn't just about thinking differently or feeling differently or wanting something more intensely. It's about creating actual space. Think about trying to fill a glass that's already full. It doesn't matter how pure the water you're trying to pour is. It doesn't matter how much you need that water. The glass simply can't hold more until you empty some of what's already there. Your consciousness works the same way. Manifestation doesn't occur simply because you've learned the right techniques or because you've added more practices to your routine. It occurs because you've created an internal environment, an actual energetic space where something new can take root and live and grow without being immediately crowded out by old patterns, old fears, old identities that are still taking up all the room. Most people are trying to manifest while their inner world is completely cluttered. They're holding on to resentments from 5 years ago, carrying anxiety about imagined futures, maintaining relationships that drain them, consuming content that keeps them in scarcity, consciousness, and running mental loops that rehearse failure over and over. And then they wonder why their manifestation practice isn't working. It's not that the universe isn't responding. It's that there's no space inside them for the response to actually land and stabilize. The new reality arrives and immediately gets pushed back out because there's no room for it to exist alongside everything they're still holding on to. Creating space isn't about becoming empty or detached from life. It's about becoming selective, about deliberately clearing out what doesn't serve your evolution so that what does serve it has room to breathe and expand. It's about releasing the grip on old stories, processing stuck emotions instead of just storing them, saying no to commitments that aren't aligned, and protecting your attention from the constant bombardment of noise that keeps your system in perpetual overwhelm. When you create this kind of internal space, you become receptive in a way that wasn't possible before, and that receptivity changes everything about what can reach you and what you can integrate. But even as you create space and become more receptive, there's a delicate balance you need to maintain with how you read the signals the universe is sending you, because life is constantly speaking, constantly giving you feedback, constantly showing you what's aligned and what's not. But that communication doesn't always come through words or obvious signs. Sometimes it comes through what look like small coincidences, moments that shift something in your chest even though logically they shouldn't mean anything. That shift, that sudden sense of rightness or recognition or alignment, that's synchronicity. And when you learn to read it with maturity, it becomes an incredibly useful language for navigation. The key word there is maturity, because synchronicity can either be a tool for clarity or it can become an addiction that keeps you trapped in a labyrinth of sign-seeking. When you're reading synchronicities with maturity, you notice them, you feel the resonance, you let them inform your next step, and then you move on. You don't need constant confirmation, you don't obsess over whether something was a sign or not, you don't make every little coincidence mean something cosmic. You trust the clear ones, and you keep moving forward regardless. But when synchronicity becomes an addiction, when you can't take a single step without consulting the universe for signs, when you're constantly looking for external validation of your internal knowing, when every decision gets delayed because you're waiting for the perfect signal, You've turned a helpful tool into a prison. You've made yourself dependent on something outside yourself to tell you what you already know inside yourself. And that dependence weakens your manifestation power because you've given your authority away. The transformation happens when you understand that synchronicities are responses to your aligned movement, not substitutes for it. They show up to confirm you're on track, to offer course corrections, to highlight opportunities you might have missed. But they're not meant to be your primary guidance system. Your primary guidance is your internal knowing, your coherence, your alignment with your truth. Synchronicities are the universe winking at you, saying yes this way, not the universe doing all the navigation while you passively follow breadcrumbs. Leave I. Trust my inner knowing in the comments if you're learning to use synchronicity as confirmation rather than becoming dependent on it for every decision. Now let me reveal something that explains why so many people get tantalizingly close to what they want and then watch it slip away at the last moment. You've probably seen this pattern, maybe even lived it yourself. Someone does everything seemingly right. They maintain positive thinking, they visualize daily, they work hard, they show up consistently, and things start to move. Opportunities appear, relationships develop, money starts flowing. But then, right when it's about to solidify, right when the good thing is about to become permanent, something shifts. They get uncomfortable. They start finding flaws that weren't there before. They pick fights, they self-sabotage, they create problems where none existed. And from the outside, it looks like bad luck or terrible timing. But from the inside, if you're honest enough to look, it's something else entirely. It's a lack of internal permission, and the most direct name for that permission is deservingness. Not deservingness in the entitled sense, but deservingness as in the deep cellular belief that it's genuinely safe for you to receive and keep good things. Most people don't actually feel deserving at that foundational level, no matter what they say consciously. And their system, which is far more honest than their words, creates disruption right at the threshold of receiving, because somewhere deep down there's a program running that says this isn't for me, or good things don't last, or I'm not the kind of person this happens to. This is the hidden truth behind so much manifestation failure. The universe isn't withholding. Your techniques aren't wrong. You're just hitting your internal permission ceiling, the invisible limit on how much goodness you actually believe you're allowed to experience. And until you expand that ceiling by genuinely upgrading your sense of deservingness, you'll keep recreating this pattern of almost but not quite, of getting close and then watching it dissolve. The work here isn't about convincing yourself you deserve good things through affirmations. The work is about identifying where that lack of permission lives in your body, what old story or wound or belief is maintaining it, and then systematically proving to yourself, through small acts of self-honor, that you are actually capable of receiving and holding goodness. But even as you're working on deservingness, even as you're expanding your capacity to receive, there's another crucial element that determines whether your manifestations can actually stabilize or whether they'll keep dissolving. And that element is boundaries. There's a reason so many people feel like they manifest things momentarily and then watch everything dilute and disappear. It's because their energy has no container. They're like a vessel with holes in it, constantly filling up and constantly leaking out, never able to hold anything long enough for it to become solid and real. The container in real life, the structure that actually allows your energy to accumulate and your manifestations to stabilize, is called boundaries. And I'm not talking about boundaries as walls that keep everything out. I'm talking about boundaries as conscious choices about where your energy goes and where it doesn't, about what you allow into your space and what you keep out. Without boundaries, your attention disperses in 1,000 different directions based on whoever demands it loudest. Your emotional state gets contaminated by every drama and crisis around you. Your time falls apart because you say yes to things that don't actually serve your vision, and your identity inevitably returns to the old version, the one that adapts and accommodates and sacrifices itself to avoid bothering anyone. With clear boundaries, everything changes. Your attention becomes focused because you're protecting it from constant hijacking. Your emotional state stays clearer because you're not absorbing everyone else's chaos. Your time actually goes toward what matters because you've learned to say no to what doesn't. And your identity strengthens because you're consistently choosing yourself, which is the ultimate act of deservingness in practice. Boundaries aren't about being rigid or unkind. They're about being clear, about knowing what serves your highest evolution and having the courage to honor that knowing, even when it makes others uncomfortable. The transformation that happens when you combine expanded deservingness with strong boundaries is remarkable. Suddenly, you can receive good things without immediately sabotaging them. You can hold opportunities without letting them slip through your fingers. You can maintain gains instead of constantly starting over. You've created both the internal permission and the external container that manifestation requires to move from momentary to sustainable. Type "I'm worthy and boundaried" if you recognize that these two elements have been missing from your manifestation practice and you're ready to build them now. If you've made it this far in this journey with me, first of all, thank you. Genuinely, because staying present through this entire conversation means something. It means you're not just passively consuming content looking for quick fixes. You're actually doing the work of transformation, and that matters more than you might realize right now. Here's the thing about what we've explored together today. This isn't information you absorb once and move on from. This is the kind of understanding that needs to be revisited, reflected on, integrated over time, which is why I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because we're building something here. A community of people who are willing to look honestly at how reality actually works, who are committed to their own evolution, who understand that manifestation isn't magic, it's mastery, and there's so much more I want to share with you on this path. If this conversation resonated with you, if you felt something shift while listening, do me a favor and drop a comment saying, "This message was meant for me." I read every single comment, and there's something powerful about declaring your commitment, even in that small way. It's an act of claiming this knowledge as yours, of saying yes to your own transformation, and it helps this message reach others who need to hear it, people who are ready for this level of truth. And if you found value in what we covered here, hit that like button. Not for the algorithm, though that helps too, but because it's a way of acknowledging the connection we just shared. This wasn't just me talking at you for an hour. This was a genuine exchange, and your like is a signal that it landed, that something here mattered to you. Now, everything we've discussed today is just one piece of a much larger picture. There's a video right here that goes even deeper into how to maintain your frequency when external circumstances are trying to pull you down. And it's the perfect next step after what you've just learned. Click and continue with me over there, because the momentum you've built in this conversation deserves to keep moving forward. I'll see you in the next one.